For a very brief 2 months, I worked as a delivery driver for the app DoorDash. It was to make some quick money on the side on the weekends. I live in a suburb of Nevada, so deliveries are usually quick and close. Someone made a big order to a local burger joint, and I accepted the delivery. When the food was finished, I loaded it into my car and checked the destination on the app. It was a house across town in cul-de-sac. I tended to drive quickly over the speed limit to get more deliveries out, aka get more money when you drive like me, though you're bound to get into some trouble once in a while. And this time, as I was driving up the block towards the cul-de-sac, I saw the sickening glow of the blue and red lights in my rearview mirror. I pulled to the side and got written a ticket for more money than I'd possibly even make that night. It was a horrible feeling that I'd spend my night doing deliveries only to end up losing money. Still had to finish this delivery. I'll be a bit late now. After the cop got back in his car, I drove right down towards the cul-de-sac. I got to the house, ran towards the front door, and knocked really hard, since there was apparently no doorbell. As I waited for the door to open, I looked around this dark cul-de-sac. I say dark because there weren't any street lights, only the small amount of light that was given off by the 3 total houses sitting on the street. It was a pretty unusual dead end, not a nice looking spot by any means. The house wasn't exactly the prettiest either. The door finally opened and an average height bald guy opened the door. He had a grayish beard with brown stains in the middle. His body language and way of behaving was immediately weird, screaming drunk or a drug addict. To top it off, his breath was awful as he said, "How you doing?" in his loud, obnoxious voice. He told me to come in. I told him no, it's okay, as I held out his bag of food waiting for him to grab it so I could leave. He said, "No, now, come in, I got something for you." I told him, "Really, it's okay, I need to be on my way." He said something along the lines of not being able to tip me through the app, so he would have to give me some cash money. Against my better judgment, I entered the house with his food still in my hand. I heard the car pulling up into the cul-de-sac. As I stepped inside, as soon as I cleared the door, the man slammed it shut and told me to follow him to the kitchen and to put the food on the table. For some reasons, even as uncomfortable as this guy made me, I followed him into his disgusting, messy, smelly kitchen. He went into his basement and told me to wait there in the kitchen. He shut the door and I heard him stepping down the steps. I stood there feeling awkward but also nervous. There was a short silence, and I stood there looking at my phone, texting a couple of friends about what I was experiencing. Suddenly, there was a huge crash from down in the basement. Sounded like a big shelf holding a bunch of smaller items toppling over, followed by what was a scream for help. It seemed as though the man was hurt by whatever had fallen down. I ran to the basement door and opened it, and to my surprise looked down to see nothing but darkness. Not a single light was on. I called down into the basement, "You okay?" I heard the man moaning in apparent pain in the darkness below. I asked where the light switch was. Steady just kept saying, "Help." I used a flashlight on my Samsung to start walking down the noisy, creaky stairs. As I got maybe halfway down, the man's moaning sound stopped, and it was completely silent. I stopped as I realized how silent it had grown and asked if it was still okay. There was no response. Suddenly, I got a really bad feeling in my gut. Something wasn't right. I heard a small cracking sound from in front of the steps, like a pebble being crashed against a concrete floor. Then there was a loud knocking at the front door upstairs. I turned and ran upstairs to open it, and it was the cop who had pulled me over about 5 minutes ago. He was holding something familiar, two folded pieces of paper clipped together, asking me if it was mine. It was, and I grabbed it from him, but I also told him in obvious distress that I thought something strange was going on about this man who had just delivered food too. I told him it sounded like he got injured downstairs, but that it also seemed suspicious. I showed the cops to the basement door, and with his hands on his holster, he called down into the basement. I told him there wasn't a light switch, so he took out his flashlight and started walking down the stairs slowly. I waited at the top of the stairs as he progressed to the bottom step, then disappeared from my view. I didn't wait too long before hearing a commotion downstairs. The cops seemed to be yelling in response to being attacked. The commotion ended with a gunshot, and there were cries of pain. Genuine cries this time. The cop called up to me and come help and get the guy upstairs and asked me to hold the flashlight as he guided the man who is now coughed up the stairs. All the while he was screaming in pain and at the cop. The cop brought him outside and called for an ambulance on his radio. He wanted me to stick around to sign a witness statement. I stuck around for about half an hour before I left and went home. Who would have thought the same cop who wrote me a ticket would potentially save my life 10 minutes later? A man was injured in a car accident and had to stay at home for a few weeks until he recovered. His wife was working and wasn't able to take care of him. It was too painful for him to go outside, so he had to spend most of his time in the apartment. For the first couple of days, it was easy. He had a lot of things to do, but after a few days had passed, he became very bored. One day, he was watching TV when he happened to hear footsteps and children's voices coming from the apartment above him. He wondered why the children were home, because the schools were not on holidays yet. The next day, he heard the same footsteps and children's voices. It sounded like there were two children playing. The next day, the man grew even more bored and didn't feel like cooking lunch for himself. Instead, he ordered a pizza delivery. As it turned out, he ordered too much, and when he finished eating, there was still one whole pizza lying untouched on the kitchen table. He remembered that there were some children living in the apartment above him, so he decided that they may like a free pizza. Upstairs, and willing to do something kind, he decided to take the pizza to them. The man had never met the family who lived in the upstairs apartment, but he rang the doorbell anyway. There was no answer, even though he heard someone moving about inside. He rang the bell again and noticed that someone was peering at him through the peephole. "Who is it?" called a faint woman's voice from behind the door. The man explained that he lived in the apartment below and had some leftover pizza left from lunch and wondered if the family wanted it. The door opened slightly and the man could see part of the woman's face through the gap. He noticed that it looked unusually dark inside the apartment. "Thanks, but we don't want any," said the woman coldly. "Maybe your children would like it," replied the man. As soon as he said yes, two children's faces lined up below the woman's face. The door was open, still just a crack. The children stared at him. The three faces were forming a line. "Okay, give it to me then," said the woman. A hand reached out through the gap and snatched a pizza box. The man just stood there. The three faces were still staring at him. Then the door slammed shut and he walked away. Something was bothering him. He felt a chill run down his spine. The image of the three faces was burned into his mind. He walked faster and reached the elevator. The faces were forming a line, he thought to himself. He pressed a button and waited for the elevator to arrive, forming a line, vertically, one the top of the other. He pressed the button again and again, but the lift still did not come. Something was seriously wrong. The faces. He began quickly walk down the stairs, faces lined up, on top of each other. That's impossible. He frantically ran down the stairs. Nobody's. Finally, he reached his apartment door, just hands holding up the heads. Safely inside his apartment, the man picked up the phone and called the police. He tried to explain what he had seen. When the police arrived, they searched the apartment upstairs and found the bodies of the woman and her 2 children lying in the bathtub. Their heads were missing. They had been decapitated with a saw. According to the autopsy, they had been dead for 3 days. The police found the woman's husband hiding in a wardrobe. His hands were covered in blood and he had gone completely insane. He kept trying to convince the police officers that his wife and kids were still alive. They found an uneaten pizza sitting on the kitchen table.